Today is March 6th, 2021. It has been almost exactly a year since COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. Just under a year because it was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on March 11th, 2020. It has also been just under a year since COVID-19 restrictions started being put into place, since social distancing measures started being enforced, since lockdowns began, since people started wearing masks. All this happened during March. All of this started to unfold in the second week of March, and we're just now finishing up the first week of March. So it has been basically a year since we've had to start dealing with all of this, since we've had to start dealing with this pandemic. And it looks like we're on the back end of things. It looks like we're on the recovering end of things. I really hope that I'm not wrong about this, but the data points to the fact that we have already experienced the worst of this pandemic, both on a global scale and a national scale. We've seen the worst of COVID 19 in terms of the number of cases per day and deaths per day. I think back in early January in the United States, that's when we reached 300,000 cases in a single day due to COVID 19, and that's when we reached around 4,000 deaths a day due to COVID 19. So the past winter was really bad. It started in October, that's when things started getting bad, but it got worse through November and December. Near the end of 2020, it started getting really bad, and in early January, it was really bad, but throughout January and February, we started to recover. And in the United States, at least, that was when we were dealing with the third wave of this pandemic, and it was by far the worst wave of this pandemic. It was really bad. We saw more deaths per day due to COVID 19 in the United States than the number of deaths due to 9/11 20 years ago. That just shows how bad it has been. The fact that in the United States we had a 9/11 worth of deaths per day every day for around 2 months in December and January and late November. But I want to talk about in this video, since it's been almost a year, I want to talk about some of the future projections that this website called covid19.healthdata.org has for the upcoming months. And so far, it projects up until July 1st. When I made a video like this around a month ago, it had up until May 1st, but it has since updated. So now it has projections all the way up until July 1st, 2021. So once we're halfway through 2021. Since I'm ending my daily series on March 13th, this will probably be the last projections video I'm going to do, so I think it's a good idea to do it now and talk about what's going to happen throughout the first half of 2021, because I think that by the time we reach mid 2021, we'll be pretty close to ending this pandemic because a lot of people will have gotten the vaccine, many people have access. Our biggest threat here on out is there being a mutation that makes the vaccination efforts less effective, and that could also potentially cause a fourth wave mutations. But besides that, I think we've already dealt with the worst of this pandemic on a national scale and a global scale. Let's actually get into the projections though. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna split this into two parts. If I don't have enough time in this video, I'm going to split it up into two parts, one with the United States numbers, another with the worldwide numbers. Let's see how long it takes in this video. Let's see if I can get through the global numbers in this video. If not, I'll make another video for the national numbers. So, this website projects that by July 1st, 2021, we'll have 3,893,000 deaths due to COVID 19, but it gives three separate projections. So, there's the average projection, there's the best case scenario, and there's the worst case scenario. So, currently, we have close to 3 million deaths due to COVID 19. I believe it's around 2.5 million deaths, but this website says that we have 3 million deaths. I think it's trying to make up for the fact that the deaths on a worldwide scale are undercounted because not all the deaths get reported, and sometimes people might die due to COVID 19, but it's not diagnosed as a COVID 19 death. I don't know, but I think the main reason is because just these deaths are not reported. But regardless, this model projects that by July 1st, 2021, best case scenario, we have 3.67 million deaths. The average projection is 3.89 million. Worst case scenario, 4.26 million deaths. So, according to worldometers.com, the total death count due to COVID 19 across the planet is right around 2.6 million. Right now, it's 2,599,984. So, it's very soon going to reach 2.6 million deaths. But this projection model says that we're currently at, as of March 6, 2021, we're currently at 3 million deaths approximately. So I guess that this model is trying to make up for the undercounted deaths, because that means that there's around 400,000 deaths that have not been reported as COVID 19 deaths, or 400,000 people have died due to COVID 19 and these deaths have not been reported. It also projects daily deaths for the next few months up until July 1st, 2021. So it appears that there might actually be another slight increase in the daily death count in late March, early April, and this uptick in the daily death count across the planet in late March and early April might have to do with the fact that new mutations of COVID-19 might be spreading more. I think it's the B117 mutation, a mutation of COVID-19 that was originally found in the United Kingdom, that was originally found to be spreading there. I think that's the mutation that scientists are most worried about that could potentially cause a fourth wave in the upcoming weeks. And it's the mutation that's expected to start spreading a lot more in the upcoming weeks. But this projection model shows that we could reach a new peak, not as bad as the previous peak, but like a relative peak on March 26, 2021, around there. Like in the last few days of March, there could be another relative peak, and then from March 27th onwards, this model projects a continuous downward trend in the daily death count across the planet. So back in late January, at its worst, we had around 16,000 deaths per day worldwide. And in late March, when the relative peak is expected to occur, the best case scenario is 12,000 deaths per day. The average projection is 12.5 thousand deaths per day. Worst case scenario is a bit over 13,000 deaths per day. So I guess the future projections that are closer in time to today, there's less variability between the best case scenario and worst case scenario. I guess as you go further and further out in time from today, there's more variability between the best and worst case scenarios because it's harder to predict what will happen as you get further and further away from today. So as the months continue, as April, May, and June go by, the daily death count in all three of the projections are expected to decrease, but it's expected to decrease a lot faster in the best case scenario than in the worst case scenario. And this model projects that best case scenario by the end of June, by July 1st, 2021, we'll have around 1750 deaths per day, best case scenario, and then the average scenario is 2.7 thousand deaths per day worldwide, and the worst case scenario is actually a lot worse than that, relatively speaking, at around 7.7 thousand deaths per day. So I'm really hoping we're closer to the average or best case scenarios, and the worst case scenarios, 7.7 thousand deaths per day is a lot worse than like 1,000 or 2,000 deaths per day. Now let's take a look at hospital resource usage. So currently we're at around 750,000 hospital beds that are needed, and 70,000 ICU beds are needed, 163,000 invasive ventilators are needed. There's not expected to be much change between the ICU numbers and invasive ventilators numbers, but in total, the number of beds that are needed is expected to decrease by quite a bit in the upcoming months. And by July 1st, 2021, it's expected that we're only going to need around 512,000 beds in total, and around 123,000 invasive ventilators, and around 78,000 ICU beds worldwide. Now let's take a look at daily infections, and kind of like with the death count, I think this model takes into account the fact that a lot of cases don't actually get recorded. A lot of people, especially if they're asymptomatic, they just never get tested for COVID-19, but they still have the disease regardless. So I think that this model is taking that into account because this projection model says that we're currently getting around 2.5 million new cases of COVID-19 per day across the planet, but in reality, it's a lot less than that. According to worldometers.com, we're currently only getting around 500,000 new cases per day of COVID-19. So I guess this model is trying to take into account all the cases of COVID-19 that never get tested for. But anyway, this model projects that by July 1st, 2021, in the worst case scenario, we get around 3.5 million new cases of COVID-19 per day in early July, late June. So by July 1st, 2021, worst case scenario, we get 3.5 million new cases of COVID-19 per day, which is actually worse than what we're currently experiencing. So this is actually a pretty bad scenario if it gets worse in 2021, in the middle of 2021, than what we're currently experiencing. But the truth is that even though the United States has been able to vaccinate a good amount of its citizens, many other countries unfortunately are not able to do that. And that might be a reason why the United States gets a lot better in the upcoming months, but the worldwide numbers don't get that much better. But the average projection is 1.35 million cases per day by July 1st, 2021, which is still better than what we're experiencing currently, but not that much better. So even in the average projection, things aren't all that much better for the worldwide numbers. And then the best case scenario is by July 1st, 2021, One, only 450,000 cases per day of COVID-19, which is a lot better than what we're currently experiencing according to this projection model. So I'm really hoping that we can get closer to the best case scenario and we don't end up at the average case scenario, and definitely don't want to end up at the worst case scenario. Once again, I think that this model is trying to take into account the case of COVID 19 that go untested. So whenever the actual numbers start to come in as time goes by, they're not going to be nearly as high. Like, we're not going to see a million cases per day. Like, this model projects that best case scenario, you get 450,000 cases of COVID 19 per day by July 1st, 2021. But I honestly think that in terms of the actually recorded cases, the worst case scenario is actually closer to 450,000. But keep in mind, that's just the recorded cases. So in reality, even if we have around 450,000 cases per day by July 2021, the actual number of cases is likely going to be a lot higher than just 450,000 per day. But I think this model is trying to take that into account, and it's trying to project the true amount of cases, not just the recorded number of cases. Now for mask usage, this model projects that it says that we're currently at around 63% mask usage across the planet, but this model also projects that that's not expected to go down much even by the middle of 2021. And I guess that would be because a lot of countries aren't going to be able to vaccinate a lot of their people even by the first half of 2021, even once the first half of 2021 finishes up. Because by July 1st, 2021, the projection for mask usage is at 58%, which is only 5 percentage points lower than what we're currently at, with 63% mask usage across the planet. So even after half of 2021 finishes up, the expected mask usage is not expected to go down by much in the next 4 months. July 2021 is 4 months away. We're currently in March 2021. What's weird to think about to me is that July 2020 was only 4 months after March 2020 when the pandemic began, but it's also 8 months in the past. I don't know why, but July kind of feels like the halfway point of the pandemic to me. I guess the second half of the pandemic up until now has gone by a lot quicker than the first half, because I guess in the first half everything was a lot newer to me, but by the time it became like fall 2020 and even winter 2021, I was a lot more used to COVID and lockdown and social distancing, I guess. Speaking of social distancing, the final projection that this model has for the worldwide numbers is the social distancing metric. And this projection model basically projects how much mobility there will be in the next few months. So, according to this model, currently across the planet, the average mobility is around 19% less than normal. So currently across the planet on average there's 19% less mobility than if there wasn't a pandemic. And this is actually expected to stay around the same up until July 2021. So by July 1st, 2021, in the worst case scenario, I guess worse in terms of like number of COVID 19 cases and number of COVID 19 deaths. Obviously, if we can go out more, that's better, but we should only go out more if it's safe to do so. So, in the worst case scenario, by July 1st, 2021, worst in terms of number of COVID 19 cases and deaths, I'm guessing, the worst case scenario is that there's only 11% less mobility across the planet by July 2021 compared to normal when there isn't a pandemic. And then the average projection is actually around the same as the best case scenario. I guess average and best case scenario in terms of number of COVID 19 cases and deaths, but somehow the average projection actually has less mobility than the best case scenario. This model projects that best case scenario total mobility across the planet is 20% less than normal by July 1st, 2021, but the average projection is 21% less than normal, which is less mobility than the best case scenario. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case, but regardless, they're both around the same. Average scenario and best case scenario both project 20% less mobility than normal by July 2021. That's actually what we're currently at approximately, because currently, according to this projection model, we're at 19% less mobility than normal currently, and I guess the average scenario and best case scenario both project that the mobility by July 1st, 2021 is going to be around the same as the current mobility. For reference, in August of 2020, so August of last year, the mobility was around 25% less than normal. So I'm going to leave the United States part of this projection model video to tomorrow's video since I don't have enough time left in today's video. But unfortunately, this model doesn't project the total COVID 19 case count, but based on past data and current trends, I would expect the total worldwide COVID-19 case count to be around 150 million by July 1st, 2021.